Sean Cooley is a business transformation expert, global keynote speaker, and author on technological disruption. Sean was the winner of the Most Innovative Speaker Award as well as Best Written Paper by a Practitioner in 2017, and returns to the SAPEX stage by overwhelmingly popular demand. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sean Cooley.
Good morning. It's always good to follow a professionally trained TV presenter, I think, as an amateur speaker. It's 2019, can you believe it? This is the year when Blade Runner was set. The film that had replicants and Mars colonization, but had TVs with cathode rays and aerials on top of it because they hadn't imagined the internet. Which just goes to show that, predictions are hard, especially about the future. So, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the same sort of stuff I talked last time. So if you've been here before and heard me before, you might as well go, to be honest. But I'm going to talk to you about why is the world so disruptive right now? There's a term that people like Gartner have used for a while. It's a military term called VUCA. So the world is VUCA right now. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. And, really what they're doing is naming a symptom. There's no magic in that. And hey, it's very disruptive right now. And they go, okay. And, but there's no solution because they don't know why. And that question really intrigued me because everyone was going, it's really disruptive right now. We need to change everything. It's VUCA. And apart from, lots of consultants earning lots of money going around telling everyone it's VUCA, there was no real rationale to the symptom. So that intrigued me. It intrigued me so much, I thought I'd spend my entire life savings, my pension, and take a year off work writing a book. It was a big book. That is the actual size. It's a 1-to-1 scale. In fact, now it's a bit smaller, but much thicker than it appears on there. And some of the elements that were really interesting in the research, this was a book that was only going to take 3 months, 5 years ago, and it's only just been published, was around why. Why is it VUCA right now? So why is it quite disruptive? And it comes down to capitalism, really. It comes down to the powers of capitalism, and it's ever since we had the Industrial Revolution. And why did we have the Industrial Revolution in England? I could go on about that, but that would be all I talk about. But let's talk about waves of capitalism. So this chap here is called Nikolai Kondratyev. He's a Soviet economist. He was working for Joseph Stalin. And at the time of the Great Depression, Stalin said to Kondratyev, to Nikolai, he said, figure out exactly why this Great Depression is happening, because surely it is the end of capitalism, and communism is the future. And Nikolai went away, did his research, and he went back and said, Joseph, I don't believe that to be true. I think capitalism is an evolutionary system. I think it comes in waves. And I think this is just the collapse of one cycle and then the rise of another. And Joseph was, as all good totalitarian leaders would be, he said, I don't think you quite understood the brief. Your job was to say that communism was the future, capitalism was doomed. And he said, yes, but I don't believe that to be true. None of the research proves that to be true. I think we've had 2 waves, and this is just the collapse of the 3rd wave. And Joseph did what every good totalitarian leader does, which is send him to the gulag for the rest of his life and then have him executed at the age of 42. And bury his work, of course, because we don't want to know facts that are inconvenient. But they came out of Soviet Russia and into the hands of an Austrian economist called Joseph Schumpeter, who said Kondratyev was right. But it didn't explain the why question. Why are these waves there? Why does capitalism ebb and flow? And he came up with his most enduring term, which is that of creative destruction. So basically, much like if you're into marketing theories and look at diffusion of innovations, it's a macro diffusion of innovation where at the start we have the entrepreneurs and the innovations, and they create big new macro technologies that create a whole new wave of progress. And then in the middle of that wave, so we have a big upswing, and then in the middle of the wave, they become operationalized and commoditized, and then money doesn't see those quick returns from industry anymore, and it moves to more easier products, financial products, and efficiencies, and cost cuttings, and exploitations, and ultimately a big debt bubble builds, and it collapses. And there's been 5 of these today. There's been 5 of these waves. And as you can see, each one has a new transport mechanism, a new power source, a new communication mechanism, and they merge together to create whole rafts of new industries that leverage this opportunity. And it collapsed around about 2008, and you might remember what happened in 2008, because money was trying to make quick returns from money, and it took more and more risks until ultimately you have the subprime collapse. But these waves are getting stronger and faster and higher. Why? The frequency is shortening. So the original first wave took about 70 years. Now they're about 50 years in length. The impact is getting bigger. There's more innovation in each wave. Initially, it was just in Britain and things around the Industrial Revolution. Now, it's across multiple different industries. The rate of diffusion has improved and increased dramatically. Innovations used to have to move across countries by sailboat. Now they move instantly via digital. And finally, the scope. It was Britain initially, then West Germany, the US, Japan. Now it's the world. Things that come out of Silicon Valley can be available to pretty much anyone worldwide almost immediately. And we're now in the transition period between the fifth and the sixth wave. In fact, we're starting to wave cheerio to the fifth wave. It's pretty much gone now. We're now in the upswing period of the sixth wave. And these are incredibly disruptive times. And one of the really interesting things about the sixth wave is previous waves have been limited to some extent, either by geography, but also by industry. So, the agricultural industry initially, the automotive industry earlier. So it affected some industries, it didn't affect others. But these sort of macro forces of hyper-competition, globalization, technological disruption, there isn't anyone who's getting away with it. I talk from people in real estate all the way through to pharmaceuticals or heavy industry. They're all feeling it. It's impacting every industry at the same time. And it's changing our paradigms. It's changing the way we view the world. So in the fifth wave, labor was relatively cheap, but data was particularly expensive. So for example, in 1980, for $3,500, you could get a whole 10 megabytes, whereas now I can go onto Amazon for $79.99, I can get 4 terabytes of memory. So the price per gigabyte has changed from $349,500 to just under 2 cents. So that's a 400% increase in the amount of memory for only 2.28% of the cost. Now that's exponential, so that means in the sixth wave, we've got a reverse. Data is now particularly cheap, and it's labor that's expensive. It's changed the way we interact with people as well. In the fifth wave, we were always told not to get into strangers' cars and don't meet any weirdos from the internet. Now we summon strangers from the internet and we get into their cars. Yeah. We've gone from enjoying the moment, so these people here watching Tiger Woods, strike off there, and now we're just more interested in recording the moment. Everyone looking for the phone, and if it wasn't on Facebook, was you even there? Did it even happen? It's even changed the way we parent. So when I was growing up as a young lad, I was always getting the clip around the back of the head and say, look, don't sit too close to the screen, Sean, you're going to get square eyes. Anyone else have that? Yeah. Now we strap the screen to our children's eyes. Don't worry about it, just put that on your face. Yeah. But it's shifted the power between the manufacturer and the consumer. And this is one of the major driving macro shifts that is actually changing everything in the sixth wave. So the example I like to use was the media industry, which was the first one that was impacted by digital. So we were always told what we were going to watch and when we were going to watch it. The manufacturer, the media company, was in control. So if you went into work and said, did you see the film last night? People would go, yeah, it was good, wasn't it? Or, no, I didn't see it. Because they knew what film you were talking about. Because there was only one on, and in the UK that was 9 o'clock on ITV. That was the film. It was on the cinema 3 years previously, and you had to wait those 3 years before it actually came onto the TV. If you went in and said, did you watch the match last night? They would know what matched. The media controlled. You knew. Now we're in a Netflix world. You go in and say, did you see the film last night? They'd be like, well, what film? We've got the entirety of every film ever made to watch, either legally through Netflix or illegally via some streaming device or on YouTube. In fact, now we're in a world where we have different people in different houses in the same room watching different things on different devices. So everyone's watched Game of Thrones. Most people were disappointed with the ending. But most people watched them at different times and on different devices. Not many people watched it when it first came out. They caught up with it later. So the consumer now has control. And it's actually changing the boundaries between the physical and the digital world. So we want this omni-channel experience. Thank you for being the only person that's laughing at that. I really appreciate that. The rest of you, please, try harder. And in fact, we've now got a new breed of digital natives. You see, we see the transition because we're fifth wave people. Just checking the audience. Yeah, we're fifth wave people. But some people who are now born into this know no different. This isn't different. It's just as the way it is. So this young girl here in China, this is the way she shops. Had a panic then. And you can see here, this is not a new way of buying things. It's the way she buys things. Yeah. She gets a little app on a smartwatch, pays for it. Got it, thank you very much. She's a digital native. She hasn't noticed any transition. She's just at one with technology. Oops, sorry. And convenience is now king to the new consumers. They don't want to wait. One thing we've learned through e-commerce is actually if you provided something that takes away waiting or inconvenience, people will buy it. We're lazy. Homo sapiens' one defining feature is we're lazy. Give us a way to do something quicker and we'll take it. So now we have things like Uber Eats and Rodash or Just Eat in the UK. My son, orders McDonald's and has it sent to his student flat. And I'm like, if you're going to eat fast food, at least walk for it. At least burn some calories out, And now what people want is access. One thing that the digitization has helped us to do is you don't have to buy stuff anymore. We just want access. We don't want to have to buy a DVD necessarily. We just want to watch the movie. And soon, we won't want to buy cars. We just want to be transported. What's the job to be done? But it's increasing from a supply chain, guys. And from a supply chain perspective, this has dramatically increased the complexity. Rather than shipping big volumes to one particular location, we're now having to shop wherever the customer wants us to go. So we've moved from a nice, single, manufacturer-driven supply push model to where the supply chain is effectively now a circle with the customer at its heart. In the fifth wave, we used to travel to the retailer, so our weekends were spent playing the game of trying to figure out which queue was going to go down the quickest and getting it wrong nearly every single time, to a world where basically we can say, well, I want you to deliver to our car, or to a smart locker, or actually inside my house. E-commerce also has done something very interesting, which most companies didn't see coming. The returns policy is now just as important to them as the sales policy. So most people who buy things off e-commerce want to know, can I send it back? How do I send it back? And 30% of the stuff that is bought does go back. So now reverse logistics has become a sort of minor afterthought to a major part of most companies' business. In fact, it's the single biggest stream of inventory for most e-commerce companies, the stuff that's coming back. The one thing about the upswing is, though, it's a time of exponential progress. So I particularly like this Elbert Hubbard quote that says, the world is moving so fast these days that the man who says it can't be done is generally interrupted by someone who's doing it. So we're at the start. So the interesting thing is these S-curves is it starts very deceptive. These innovations are worked on behind the scenes. We see early versions of them, beta versions. And then suddenly they're everywhere. Suddenly they go from novelty to utility. They go from deceptive to disruptive, from nowhere to everywhere. And here's an example. So this is an image from 1908 on Fifth Avenue in New York. And as you can see, everyone's driving around in carriages and on horseback. 5 years later, and there's almost no horses on the road. That used to say no horses until someone sat in the audience and spotted one right at the back and made a point of pulling me to one side afterwards and said, there was still actually a horse on there. So, okay, so almost no horses. And Hans Moravec, the example of six-wave disruption. So a gentleman called Hans Moravec, he's an AI researcher. He said, one of the things we've learned from 35 years of research into AI is the things that humans find very difficult to do, massive processing of huge amounts of unstructured data, advanced algebraic calculations, actually really easy to program. The stuff that we find very easy to do, spatial awareness, picking objects up, moving them around, not bumping into things, actually incredibly difficult to program. And if you go back to 2015 and you look at the research of the DARPA, the Defense Agency's research program, and see the best robotics in the world in 2015, you would totally agree with that, because it looked like this. So staggering around like a drunk on a Friday night. So you're thinking, okay, Terminator, not so worried about that. All I've got to do is just go behind the door and it's screwed. But now, just over 3 years later, this is what it looks like. So that's an enormous amount of technological improvement in an incredibly small period of time. And the other thing that was one of the tests that we said, we'll know when machines will get really smart is when they can fool us. So what Alan Turing, who works at Bletchley Park, said, we will know when we're in a position where we can speak to a machine and not know it's a machine but think it's a human, then we will have passed the test of intelligence. And we thought that's about another 20, 30 years away until May of last year when this happened. This is Google's annual conference.
Let's say you want to call a restaurant, but maybe it's a small restaurant which is not easily available to book online. The call actually goes a bit differently than expected. So take a listen.
See, how may I help you?
Hi, I'd like to reserve a table for Wednesday the 7th.
For 7 people?
It's for 4 people.
4 people when? Today?
Next
Tonight?
Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Oh, actually we reserve for after 5 people. For 4 people you can come.
How long is the wait usually to be seated?
For when, tomorrow or weekday or?
For next Wednesday, the 7th.
Oh no, it's not too busy. You can come for 4 people, okay?
Oh, I gotcha. Thanks.
Bye bye.
Again, that was a real call. We have many of these examples where the calls quite don't go as expected, but the assistant understands the context, the nuance. It knew to ask for wait times in this case and handle the interaction gracefully.
So she didn't know she was talking to a machine at that point in time. In fact, the machine had a better command of English than the person who it was speaking to. And the interesting thing was, of course, there's no way you could have programmed that. Her answers to what he stated, or the machine stated, were non-linear. There's no if-then-else statement you really could have been able to program in there, which has been one of the big differences, because we used to think that every possible scenario, some human would have had to think it up and then write a line of code to actually, program it. Now, of course, as I'll talk about in a moment, we've got machines that can do that for themselves. But the really interesting thing, that was May 2018, and the world's kind of, Turing test has passed. We need to tell people that this is not a human. Now, if you need to put a line in that says, oh, by the way, just before we start, I'm not actually real, I reckon we've passed Turing's test. Okay? The interesting thing is, 12 months later, like now, you can buy that on basically any Android phone. So it's started off on a Galaxy S10, now it's fully available. So that technology has gone from demo to you can have it on your phone or your tablet or whatever in 12 months here. So the rate of diffusion of these innovations has gone from something cool happening over in San Francisco, we might get it in 20 years, to you get it exactly the same time everyone else does. And it's transforming the business world. So it's in the book I talk about this, what I call the creative destruction triple whammy. So what's happening is we've got anything that the things on the end of your wristies and the sweat on your brow used to do is now being automated by very intelligent machines. So the automation of physical tasks, that's whammy number one. Whammy number two is the thing that mostly people get upset about, which is you've assumed that Homo sapiens is the only thing that can think of things that do not exist and do things like planning and forecasting and all those sorts of clever tools that most people thought they had a 20-year career ahead of them on. But now it can be done by machines. And the third one is we've got machine brains starting to drive machine hands. And the real kicker for most people is that all three of those are happening at exactly the same time. So take, for an example, whammy number one, across from source, what's happening? Well, we've now got machines that can do things that we didn't think machines could do, like pick strawberries out of the ground, things I used to do on my hands and knees when I was a young boy, because it can't be too ripe because that won't sell it. It can't be not ripe enough because I've got to leave it. It might be behind a strawberry leaf. I've got to make a lot of quite a cerebral decisions and actually have incredibly nimble fingers. So surely only humans can do that. Well, no, now machines can. There you've got some trucks there you'll see from the Rio Tinto mine at Pilbara in Australia. There's no one in them. For the last 6-7 years, they've been working totally autonomously. They're doing about 5 million kilometers now with 0 accidents, no humans. Rolls-Royce is working on making the entire ocean-going fleet totally autonomous by 2035. Airbus is working on making autonomous cargo fleets. And Rotterdam was the first fully autonomous port for a few years. Now every new port that's being built is being made autonomous, specifically under the China Belt. Plus a lot of plants, places like Nigeria, are now all looking at this and saying this creates a huge level of efficiencies, and we want to use this autonomous technology. What about manufacture? Well, manufacture was one of the first areas, of course, that industrialized. Robots came into manufacturing in the fifth wave with the automotive industry around about 1960. But they were dumb, dangerous, they did one thing, you had to put them in a cage, they were not aware of their environment. If you wanted a robot to do a different thing, you needed a different robot. So they were big capital expenditure projects, only really relevant for companies that can make it worthwhile. They were making expensive things, like the automotive. But now we have things like Baxter and Sawyer there, collaborative robots, robots that do many things, robots that get upgraded, robots that are aware of their environment, robots that can change the end of arm tooling so they can pick things or sucker things or do a whole host of very complicated things that humans needed to do. And they can work alongside the human, so you don't need to change your manufacturing plant in order to use them. You just need to put them where a human used to stand. 3D printing has advanced greatly. So that's a jet engine. It's made of titanium. It's fully working, and it's been 3D printed. So now we're able to 3D print very complex things. 3D printing itself has been disrupted by things called like clip printing, which is the ability to make solid objects out of liquid, a bit like Terminator 2. And even printing houses. So China's been, for some time now, has been using 3D printing technology in anger. Quite interesting example of how fast technology diffuses in this wave. The person who came up with the idea of using mass-scale concrete 3D printers, a process called contour crafting, was an Israeli professor in the United States who was touring the news stations in the US, talking about that in the future, we will be able to print these houses. Whilst he was still doing the tours with his little 3D rendered model of what the future could look like, the Chinese had seen it, reverse engineered it, built it, made the houses, and was selling the houses. That's how fast technology moves, especially when you don't care about intellectual property rights. What about deliver? Now, deliver's an area where we've got away with technology for a while. You've always needed human hands to drive stuff, pick stuff, put stuff away, count stuff. It's always been sort of a very human-centric part of the business. But now, ever since Kiva Robotics changed the game by stopping people from having to move to the inventory moved to the person, we've now got a massive amount of warehouse automation. We've now been talking about autonomous vehicles for some time. We're now starting to see them. Drones we've been talking about for quite a while. We're now starting to see them. Road robots we've been talking about for a while. We're now starting to see them. And road robots on autonomous trucks, we've not been talking about that long, but we're now starting to see them. To sell is human. We've always assumed that selling is a very human type. But even just the concept of selling has been disrupted by e-commerce, but also by things like the top there, where that young man is using his smartphone to order an item of product. That product doesn't really exist. It's just a display. That's a train. They're boarding a train. So the ability to turn a pillar or a bus stop or a piece of wall into a retail store. This is what we're able to do with technology. Amazon Go, just walk out technology. What's the worst bit of shopping? The bit at the end where you have to play the game about which queue's going down fastest, get there, take everything out of your basket, put it through the till, put everything back in another basket. Your basket this time. Well, what about if we just walked out? And this is the mindset of companies like Amazon that are doing the things that no one was asking for, but once you give it to them, they go, take my money. And that's now moving, as we've seen, into other places like the UK, as I'll talk about in a second. Pepper, underneath that, a humanoid robot. Again, like Baxter and Sawyer, the collaborative robots there, they're platforms. As the software advances, they advance. They become a platform that you can ultimately do many, many things. In the same way, your smartphone isn't the same as someone else's smartphone because you might have different apps on it or different programs that, although the technological hardware is the same, it's capable of doing different things. The FBI listening device there that's called an Amazon Echo that most people have in their houses, these cylinders that allow you to just say out loud what you want and the goods arrive. And beneath that, we've even got, well, how about if we don't even have to say anything out loud? How about if the machines just order the goods for us when we run low? And that's what Amazon's done with its Dash replenishment program, where it's partnered with companies like Brother and Britas and Samsung. So whenever you're low on inkjet and printer ink, it'll just order new print ink, or low on a water filter, it'll just order a new water filter, and it just arrives. Of course, when you order something through Amazon Dash replenishment, all the goods come from Amazon. So it captures that demand before anyone else gets a look in. And the workforce of the future now looks a bit like this. And these collaborative robots have huge benefits because they're flexible, they don't cost a lot, they're about $25,000. That's not a lot of money for something that works 24/7, never joins a union, never takes a break, never steals from you, And it provides greater operational insights. Now, this is one of the really interesting benefits of these is it's taking the macro and making it micro. We're getting a level of performance at an operational level. So if you asked a picker or a packer or a loader or a manufacturing worker, how many items did you do today? They wouldn't know because they were just going past them on the conveyor belt. Only the machine knows, as we'll see. So you saw it working. Are you recording all of this? Security. I'm joking. So what's happening is manufacturing started to come home. So it used to, we pushed all of the fifth wave efficiency. We pushed manufacturing to the Far East, to China, to Vietnam, to Mexico. Now what companies say, we can bring it back to where the consumer is and use this level of automation to make things like T-shirts, where we had things like the Rana Plaza disaster, where we realized that the cost of disposable fashion was disposable lives. And people don't like that. But now we're able to make things using machines and make it close to where the consumers are. Those 3D printers, clip printers that I talked about, these is what the production line of the future looks like for on-demand mass manufacturing that's customizable to each individual unit. Amazon has had for a while now patented out for an on-demand clothing manufacturing warehouse, so making clothes specifically for the person on demand. Most people doesn't realize that Amazon makes clothes. They're really surprised to find it's the second biggest clothing manufacturer in the US. And they've been beaten to the punch by companies like Zeal. So you can see this organization here that is basically it's talking sort of technology, but it's offering its services to apparel companies to say, look, we're able to make things on demand with a 72-hour turnaround from getting the sizes of the individual to actually delivering the goods. And you can see they're talking technology, on-demand manufacturing, technology-driven, size and click-suitability, sustainable materials. These are the new types of companies that are using these technologies to create whole new business opportunities. And interestingly, even manufacturing is becoming a service. So companies like Nokia are looking at this and says, there's a lot of companies that are really struggling with this, but we can actually offer this as a service to them in a modular way that allows them to basically trial things and move the manufacturing plant incredibly easy until they test the waters, rather than making huge capital investments. And it looks like this.
The requirements of the future are changing big times. We have more and more the need of local manufacturing in specific countries. We have a need to be very flexible and agile in, for example, prototype factories. We have increasing logistics costs throughout the world, and therefore the concept of a distributed factory network is just there.
In future, we are going to see new requirements to factory layouts, which go away from mass production and large-scale factories to small production facilities, which work sustainable and hit the needs of the customer. And therefore, we are looking for a modular approach to bring containers to the customer and produce on demand there. We have already concrete use cases, new product introduction. So we want to offer factory on demand or factory as a service for startups so that they can rent factories for 2 months in order to produce their prototypes of their products.
The factory in a box concept is helping to fulfill that requirements in a very modular way, where not too much manufacturing know-how is needed in the different countries, and where you can flexibly ship a factory where needed, and then if the demand is disappearing, you can ship it somewhere else.
That we are going to bring production technology, IT, and communications technology together in an integrated blueprint, so that we are going to be able to make our containers smart, conscious, intelligent, and this is requiring a total new way of approaching the design of the factories of the future.
So I think that's really interesting, the way they're looking at this and saying, well, we provide it as a service, manufacturing as a service, move it to where the demand is, test the market, not having to make huge capital expenditures, and they're all connected. So they don't necessarily need people to manage the operations that can be run, moving remotely. You talked about these big waves. Now, if you know anything about Rogers' diffusion of innovation, and it got picked up by a guy called Geoffrey Moore, who talked about a book called Crossing the Chasm. Has anyone here read Crossing the Chasm? One person, jolly good. Where it talks about innovations really shift once they cross the chasm, but outside the sort of innovators into the early adopters. And I've put together a couple of diagrams, things here. So that Gartner's hype cycle, which you might be aware of, the trough of disillusionment is effectively where the chasm is. Whereas, what happened to drones? We were talking about drones, we've never seen them. What happened to autonomous vehicles? All these things we talked about, we haven't seen them anywhere. Did they die a death? And they're at that point which says they're either going to stay a novelty or they're going to move and to become utility. And what happened in around about April this year was a whole host of different technologies came out that I thought, I think we're crossing the chasm here on a number of different technologies that actually mean we are at that tipping point. So, for example, Amazon Go had gone through the testing process in the US, and they then decided they're going to roll it out to 3,000 stores. And then they said, right, we're going to start launching this in the UK. We're going to pick the sites. So they started moving on that. Immediately, you get a knee-jerk response from the competitors. So Sainsbury's then says, we've got to play catch-up here. We've got to start having our own cashless, just walk out store. Otherwise, we're going to get left behind. So immediately you see a knee-jerk reaction of Sainsbury's saying, we're the first now to do this. Amazon might be doing it in the States, we're the first ones in the UK. It's not quite as sophisticated as Amazon is doing, but it's a similar kind of concept, a fight back. Voice ordering, Amazon Echo had been out for a while now, and what they've figured out is that actually people who are Prime members, and I'll talk about this in a moment, spend a lot more money on Amazon than people who are not Prime members. People who are Prime members and have an Amazon Echo spend even more money than people who are not Echo players. So of course Walmart's having to fight back. This ordering by voice concept is actually a thing, and it's taking off. So we need to fight back, which is exactly what they're doing.
Okay, Google, talk to Walmart. Add orange juice to my cart.
Hi, Lynn. I can get you Tropicana orange juice for $5.18.
Add baby carrots to my cart.
Okay. I can get you 2 pounds of peeled baby cut carrots.
Add laundry detergent to my cart.
I can get you Great Value Ultimate Fresh Laundry Detergent for $6.17.
Here's your shopping list.
Alexa, add eggs.
Eggs added to your shopping list.
So the thing we saw earlier with the duplex and the assistant that's now on your phones, this is the sort of technology that's now being used for the e-commerce experience where it's intelligently conversing with you. So if you forgot some goods and your wife rings you and says, can you get some milk and eggs? You just tell the phone, and the phone will then order it for you. And what's happening as well is Amazon has just dropped its free 2-day shipping to free 1-day shipping. So it's cut it in half. It's now got 10 million items that will offer same-day shipping for, which got an immediate kickback from Walmart that says we're going to have to do exactly the same. So it's now offering free 1-day shipping as well, only you don't need to be a subscriber for them. And then finally, road robots. And drones. Road robots, there was an announcement in April that Starship Robotics has completed 50,000 deliveries or 200,000 miles of testing, all successfully. So it's now gone across the chasm from being something that we're trialing to something that actually works, which is unsurprising because Amazon took that idea, painted it blue, and called it Amazon Scout a little bit earlier in the year. So now we've got this new 1-day shipping demand, so we need to be able to respond to all of these different technologies coming together. Oh, and drones, I forgot drones, sorry. Drones actually got FAA approval, apologies. Earlier this year, Google in April got the approval finally to use drones in the US. 1 month later, unsurprisingly, Amazon announced this is its new drone, and it's got approval as well. So the moment we've gone past that tipping point, we're about to see these, certainly in the US, being used in months. Warehouse obviously has to adapt to this. So if I'm going to offer 1-hour delivery, same-day delivery, I've got to be pretty close to the consumer. I can't be the other end of the country. So this is what's happening there.
This is the first Common Sense Robotics micro-fulfillment center. It is operated by hundreds of robots, fulfills thousands of orders every single day, and delivers over 10,000 different types of products to online customers around it.
Up until today, robotic fulfillment centers take up anywhere between a size of 4 football fields to about 20 football fields. And you just can't fit that into a city. Our first site, the site that we are in, is actually 1/10 of a football field in size.
In order to fit our site into small, tight urban spaces, we've designed every single element of it to optimize for space efficiency. We have hundreds of robots of different types traveling in all directions, whether it is on the ground or on the shelving units. And they can meet each other anywhere on the map, and that really enables us to fulfill the full set of what's needed for a grocery basket out of this site.
A typical order would take less than 5 minutes to fulfill end-to-end. So 5 minutes from the moment the consumer places that order online to the moment that that order is ready for dispatch and goes to delivery.
So our vision for the future is actually a network of micro-fulfillment centers in the centers of cities that support each other and enable us to move things faster, more accurately.
When you order groceries online, you would get these groceries in less than 1 hour to your doorstep. As simple as that.
So what we're looking at is a world where we have major fulfillment centers outside the cities, but these micro-fulfillment centers inside the cities in order to meet these sort of 1 hour delivery promises. But then it's actually got to get to the door. So one of the things that's happened is Starship Robotics has partnered with Daimler and to create a mothership concept. I saw it on the screen earlier. You might not have noticed it, but basically putting the robots in the van and the van trundles away to suburban areas and the robots scatter and deliver the items. But of course, it's actually got to get up to the door. So quite interestingly, that's automating the last mile bit and actually taking the product to the door. Ford is actually having a stab at this with a company called Agility Robots. So the robotics we saw earlier in they've gone from stumbling to actually quite agile. This is what has actually been used in a supply chain context. Or how it's being used, I should say.
When I order something online, I want it to arrive in half an hour, or I want it to arrive in an hour, and I don't want it to cost anything. A robot vehicle that can drive on all of our roads is going to be able to do that, but then how do you get it from the vehicle to the doorstep? And that's where our robot comes in. That's what Digit can do. Digit can take the package from the delivery vehicle, which is completely automated on its own, and take it up and set it on your doorstep.
I'm not sure how soon we're going to see them. They look incredibly fragile, don't they, with the way they're walking? They're actually not. When you actually go and look at Agility Robots, they've been testing these for a while. They're actually incredibly sturdy, which they look like, a breeze would blow them over, but that's not the case. I don't think we'll see them for a while, but these are the sorts of technologies that are being worked on, and we will be seeing them. They're trying to crack that last mile. Of course, whammy number 2 is the automation of knowledge work. And I talked about this earlier, but the thing that's changing the game here is machine learning. As a concept to start off with, because obviously what we've figured out is that we just can't write every if-then-else statement to cover every scenario. We need machines to try and start to figure this out for themselves. So if you're in a forecaster or a planner, then probably the future's not looking so bright, because what we're actually finding out is that humans are careless or fearless when it comes to doing things like forecasting. They're either not very good at it, or they're continuously over-optimistic about when we're going to hit the numbers, usually because they've got a sales guy by the side telling them, yes, we're definitely going to do this. But we're finding out the machines are actually better than us. They're better at forecasting. They're better at handling vast amounts of unstructured data. So they're better at understanding things like weather conditions and the impact. So they're actually more accurate than humans in the process of planning. And we haven't even seen anything yet. So we're here in 2018, 2019. You can see we're about to explode upwards. I talk at conferences all around the world and things like AI. I would probably be the only guy who was talking about it 3 years ago. Now everyone's talking about it. It's become the topic of conversation. You go to Gartner, you go to anywhere like this, every session is an AI-based session. And we haven't even got quantum computers yet. So once these start to happen, and there's over 60 companies currently competing to be the first to operationalize quantum computing at a stable rate, it's going to take off in a way that makes Moore's law look foolish. And we're on an exponential curve with the AI development. So around about 2015, the predictions were that we would be at we'd reach rodent level intelligence, or the similar intelligence to someone who does keynote speeches. By 2019, we're supposed to reach chimp level intelligence. So this year, we're the prediction by Ray Kurzweil, one of the leading futurists up there. 2020, we're supposed to be able to reach the intelligence of a reality TV show cast. By 2025, we're supposed to be able to reach politician-level intelligence. And then by 2029, the prediction is that we'll reach genius-level human. By 2045, the prediction is that we reach the point of technological singularity, which is where we effectively get to the level where AI is the equivalent of the intelligence of the entire human race. which everyone pretty much agrees who works in this field is going to happen, and pretty much also agrees that they don't know what happens next. And convergence number three, whammy number three is the convergence of these technologies together. So it looks a bit like this. We have AI-driven, from everything from machine learning to quantum computing. So controlling all of these different machines, controlling all of these different, tools, autonomous vehicles, robotics, cloud computing, all coming together in a convergent model. So we end up with robots doing the making and moving, some things I haven't talked about, like blockchain, recording all of the transaction in this distributed encrypted ledger, robot process automation, doing all of the back office, repetitive stuff, chatbots, as we saw, advancing to handle all the queries and do all the customer service, and AI control towers to sit on top of that and take all of the information, process it, and create a playbook for the human to go, yeah, that looks okay. One of the things that's on a massively exponential curve is 5G. It's been launched this year, so this has reached a tipping point. It's already out in the UK. Again, one of those things, once it's out everywhere. It's going to move incredibly quickly. You can see, it's not limited to one country. The rest of the world is going to be adopting that really, really quickly. And that's needed because that's driving the Internet of Things. That's the technology that's required to underpin the Internet of Things that enables us to have, digital representations of our machinery, of our pipelines, of our sewage systems, of our vehicles or engines and our buildings that turn dumb things into smart things, that have sensors everywhere that's telling us exactly what's going on so we can simulate, we can recreate, and we can predict and prevent before they actually happen. So these two Internet of Things are coming together, the consumer Internet of Things with the Amazon Echoes and the phones and all of these devices, and the industrial Internet of Things with sensors in pipelines and manufacturing units and all of those sorts of things, and collaborative robots. And I'm speaking a little bit faster because I'm running out of time. And it's coming together to form the PAL supply chain, what I call the PAL supply chain. So we're going to have personalized products and services, automated manufacturing and delivery and planning, and local production and storage is moving back to where the consumers are. Because the shorter the supply chain, the stronger the supply chain. The new pace setters are already using these tools to redesign what the six-wave supply chain would look like. I'm going to take two examples here very quickly. Amazon, you may have heard of, and JD.com over in China. Let's have a look at JD.com.
For over a decade, JD.com has focused on developing and applying state-of-the-art technologies to build an efficient retail supply chain in order to provide unparalleled customer experience. With the exponential growth of e-commerce, robotics and automation has become the enabling technology for us to achieve unmatched efficiency and quality of service in our fulfillment process. At JD, we increasingly rely on automation to fulfill our promise for same-day and next-day delivery for more than 300 million customers. We have developed a wide range of robots, including delivery drones, autonomous delivery vehicles, and fully automated warehouses, and keep redefining the experience of e-commerce.
But our vision is even bigger than that. We want to enable other retailers to offer the same thing. We truly believe the future of shopping is boundaryless. Consumers everywhere, not just JD.com's customers, should be able to buy whatever they want, whenever and wherever they want it.
So what JD.com's doing there is, and you see some of the stuff that was the sort of 3D rendered graphics because we're working on it, the sort of tube logistics from the major warehouses out of the city into the retail stores, into the micro logistics centers. They're building that right now. China doesn't have to worry about things like property rights or any of that sort of stuff, so it just builds it. But they're trying to offer that services to everyone because they understand that customers will want that experience. But they can't satisfy everything, but what they really want is the customer interface. The person who uses the customer interface wins. Why? Because it collects the data, and data is the fifth currency. It's the currency we trade in now. If you're getting anything for free right now, any app or any tool, you need to understand you're not the customer, you are the product. Because they want to know all about you in order to be able to service your needs better and sell you stuff. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, has for 25 years now been trying to build the everything store. He started off by selling books. He wasn't interested in books. He was interested in understanding whether or not the e-commerce model worked on an item that was a standard weight and a standard size, i.e. not my book. Now he sells whatever you want. He is the everything store. And you can see cash is king to them because they need cash in order to continuously innovate. So their Prime model, which is what they want you to be Prime members, in 2011 there was 5 million members. Now there's 101 million members in the US. That means that when you pay $129 upfront subscription fee, which 101 million people do, that's just over $12 billion of upfront cash flow before they buy anything. Which means that explains why Amazon is the #1 innovator in the world. It spends more money on R&D than any other company. It spent $45 billion in the last 2 years alone. What's it doing with that cash? Well, loads of things. Other than the technology, it's building airplanes. So it's had its first Prime airplane, that expanded its fleet. Now it's got 50. Now it's buying airports and building airports to actually control it. So if you're DHL or FedEx or UPS and you think Amazon is your biggest customer, no, they're your biggest competitor. You just haven't realized it yet. It's also buying up retail malls, so it's destroyed. Amazon's been responsible for the destruction of the retail mall. Now it's buying those retail malls and actually using them and turning them into fulfillment centers. Why? Because they're big, they're close to where people live, they have great population links, and they already have all the power and sewerage and everything all plugged in for them. So they're now turning them into these massive fulfillment centers that are then going to ship the goods into the city centers. So in this upswing, companies really need to understand that if you are not part of this creation, you are soon going to be part of the destruction. Most companies are not structured for the future, they're structured for the past. Labor costs are going to be less and less relevant to you. Your assets are likely to be rendered obsolete, and technology is constantly undermining the advantages of scale. And you need more than anything, more than new technology, we need a new mindset, new business models, and a new focus. And the problem for most people most companies is that their leaders were trained in the fifth wave. We've been taught in a world where change was linear. We wanted to know what we were doing next year. Let's look at last year and add a few percent. That was your target. Now, next year is going to look nothing like last year. It's not going to look anything like this year. So now we're in an exponential world, and we haven't been trained how to handle that. So I like this quote from the very late now, unfortunately, Alvin Toffler, who said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." The trouble is with most companies is short-termism. This was mentioned in Bruce's talk earlier. You know, when I ask people what stops you from being innovative, this is the same stuff that comes out again and again. We need to show short-term return. We're focusing on the quarter. We're focusing on the analyst. We're focusing on the shareholder price. We don't have a long-term vision. Silo behaviors that mean we're not working together. We're working against each other. We're scared of taking a risk, and we're playing to lose, not to win. And the reason for that is, of course, if you want to know why your culture's like that, look at the top, because leadership sets the culture. Or as Peter Drucker once said, the bottleneck is always at the top of the bottle. Yeah? So remember, technology is not teleology. It is a how, not a why. We have to have a Copernican business revolution. We used to believe that the Earth was at the center of the universe and the sun circled it. We now know that's not true, thanks to Bruno and Galileo. We now know that the sun is at the center of the universe. And we used to believe that the firm was at the center of our universe and we were important. And we need to have that same paradigm shift and realize the customer should be at the center and we need to circle it. Which means that technology is not at the center either, but a customer-focused strategy needs to be, and our technology should circle that strategy. Digital projects do not make a digital company. Most of them fail. Why? Because they're focused on the technology, not the strategy. The how and what of digital and other disruptive technologies only makes sense when you have a clear and compelling why. Any company without a strategy or any understanding of how these tools are going to enable a strategy is a company that's going to waste an awful lot of money. Without a clear focus on how it can deliver value to the consumer, technology looks all unicorns and rainbows, then you find out you're doing quite a bit of work here, and finally it's got its legs in the air, and you feel like an ass. Don't just think about automating existing jobs. That's a fifth wave mindset. Think about how these technologies could create new opportunities, create new channels, new value propositions, new business models, improve reliability, responsiveness, or sustainability, reallocate efforts, or eliminate waste and error. Think about how they can actually help drive your strategy. So the role of technology in the sixth wave is to create more compelling value propositions or product innovations, to help us understand the customer needs better, service innovations, to improve the effectiveness of delivery of those innovations through network innovations and supply chain redesigns, and to improve the efficiency and accuracy of our capability and to execute or process innovations. So leadership in the sixth wave is about being bimodal, as I think Gartner calls it, or the yin and yang of being able to keep the business ticking over and executing whilst also changing things. And it's understanding where to change and where to leave alone that becomes part of the key. So the role of leadership is to create the future, control the present, but then help manage the transition. Because you're here, you're right at the start. We haven't even got disruptive yet. You think it's VUCA now? You wait for a couple of years. There's a new golden age about to hit us, so there is big positives. New industries are going to be created. Like every wave, it creates whole new industries at the back of these new innovations that's going to create enormous amounts of wealth. But the skills to compete in those industries are going to be higher than before. Like I say, if all you got to trade is the things on the end of your wrists, they don't need you so much. They need people that are smart, people that are intelligent, people that can take these technologies and move them forwards. Massive amounts of new infrastructure projects are being developed, from the China Belt and Road project, Saudi Arabia spending $500 billion creating the future city, which is using all of these new technologies, completely driven by blockchain, IoT-enabled, renewable energies. It's for the city they are creating for the forward thinkers of the future, or as I like to call them, the rich. And then we've got Hyperloop projects that are between cities that are actually being built as well. So all this technology is soon going to cross the chasm, and there's going to be massive amounts of work there. New materials like graphene are being developed. We haven't even really got started on that yet. We believe it's about to hit the inflection point on graphene, as you saw. And there's also, for the people who've got the right mindset, there's enormous ways that they can earn money from this. Who would have thought that someone who lives in a village 3 miles out of Hanoi would earn $50,000 a day from the manufacture of a game that only took him 3 days to make? But that's what the guy who wrote Flappy Bird did. To the idea in the fifth wave that someone from a village outside Hanoi could earn $50,000 in his life was probably unbelievable not that long ago. The fact that he could earn it in a day is mind-blowing. The fact that he could earn it every single day from just 3 days' labor blows my mind. But that's what you can do. And we have other people like PewDiePie or Ninja who makes $350,000 a month from people watching him play computer games. It's a new world out there, kids. Blockchain and the Internet of Things is going to combine to create a supply chain paradigm shift. The fifth wave was all about the invisible supply chain. The best supply chain is the one you never hear about. As long as the goods get there, that's what matters. As long as it gets there without disruption, that's better. Now the sixth wave supply chain is going to be about visibility and transparency and knowing exactly where the materials are sourced from. Understand the provenance. The best supply chain will be the one you can see every aspect of it happening. What we mean by visibility? Visibility of the ethics behind the supply chain, visibility of the ecological impact of the supply chain, and the economics of the supply chain that's driving it. And if you know anything about the ASCM thing, they're doing a lot of work in this area to try and help companies to realize what those three are in their business and help to test your company out. The power supply chain, people say, all this technology, Sean, isn't it going to be ecologically damaging? No, the opposite is true. It's going to help repair some of the damages of the fifth wave in the industrial age. Because we're not going to, although we're not going to use as much labor, production's going to come down, waste is going to come down, transportation will come down, storage will come down. We'll only make what we need, where we need it. So it's actually going to bring down the cost of the supply chain enormously from an ecological perspective. The most important thing here is society as well. Now, this is one of the big things is, technology needs to circle the business, but the economy needs to circle society. And we've had that perversely the wrong way around for a long time. In the moment, I know this isn't true here for South Africa so much, but in the rest of the West, employment's at an all-time high. So people go, hey, all this disruption with technological unemployment, it's not happening, Sean. I say, no, it's not. You're absolutely right, because right now we've got the old and the new here at the same time. We've got people who drive trucks and people who are making trucks that drive themselves. Very soon, the trucks that drive themselves will take the jobs of the people who drive trucks. But the creative side of that is brilliant. It's fantastic. So it gives mobility to everyone. It doesn't matter whether or not you're old or you're disabled. You suddenly be able to move around and get transport. If you're blind or you're drunk, or even if you're blind drunk, you'll be able to get home safely, whereas previously you couldn't. But the destruction side of that, of course, is quite significant. If your job is involved driving a truck or driving a taxi, then pretty soon that is not an industry that's going to exist in the same way. And the thing is, these machines aren't just replacing jobs this time around, they're replacing capabilities. They can see, they can hear, they can speak, they can translate languages, they can do all of these things. And interestingly, they do it for not much money. And they're getting smarter. So like Google here, saying its artificial intelligence has taught itself to translate between languages they never even taught it. So, it could be the end of men. From our work, all of our skills could be rendered useless. The Chinese already know that machines and not cheap labor are their future, and they're spending a fortune on this. They're incentivizing companies to automate, not to not automate. Let's have a quick look.
Your plant that you oversee has already been automated 80%, you said. Do you see it going the rest of that 20%?
Li Zhendu, a worker at the Rapu factory, has watched as robots have replaced his colleagues.
How far off do you think we are from full automation?
我觉得应该3-5年应该可以吧。
So nobody left working in your department?
这个要根据公司来决定这种事。然后具体的话还是看公司层面。
Chinese delivery company JD is showing how automation is advancing in other industries, like logistics. There are still some employees here, but not at a JD sorting center near Shanghai. It's taking nearly all humans out of this process. And this is the same company that last year began making drone deliveries.
This is a moment of choice and opportunity. It could be the best 10 years ahead of us that we've ever had in human history, or one of the worst, because we have more power than we've ever had before. The tools by themselves are not going to lift up the billions of people who are being left behind. Those are conscious choices we have to make as a society and as individuals.
And I think that's a very powerful final statement there that Eric Belofton said there. Because machines are great producers, but they're terrible consumers, and they're sure as hell ain't very good taxpayers. Yeah? And interestingly, the companies that are making all of this technology also aren't very good taxpayers. It's all about the revenue and very little about the responsibility. So you've got companies like Amazon that paid 0 federal tax regardless of sky-high profits. Google that's been found to have 16 billion hidden away. The Paradise Papers uncovered a whole amount of tax avoidance schemes. In order for society to work, people have to pay their dues. We can't have the little local bookshop paying 20% tax and the big multinational corporation paying nothing. Our political leaders and education systems also need to adapt. If we are teaching our children to compete against the machines, we are teaching them to lose, because they will lose. So we have to teach them the things that the machines cannot do. Critical thinking, creativity, empathy, strategy, imagination. These are the things that machines struggle at. So we have to teach our children not to stand in line and learn the same stuff, the 3 R's, but actually to be imaginative and inventive. We cannot stop technological progress. One of the big pieces of the research that I did in my book was what happens to companies that try to do that. And the spoiler alert, it doesn't end well. But technology needs to work for us, not the other way around. Because the last Copernican revolution we need to have is that politics and profit and technology needs to circle people and the planet and not the other way around. Technology is amazing. What it will do will be incredible, but we need to ensure we have a society that enables us to be amazed. Thank you very much.